Good morning, Vice President Wasserman. Would you like to do a mic check?
Testing, Rhonda.
I can hear you. Do you have video capabilities as well?
I don't see it. So let me go there, rename, hide. I don't see an icon for video.
Okay, give me a moment.
I don't see anyone's picture right now. Oh, start video. How about that?
Beautiful. You look great today.
Thank you very much.
Hi, Mike.
Good
Have
morning.
a wonderful day.
There we go.
Woohoo, all these smiling faces. Yeah. Good morning, Mr. Cuejo. Would you like to do a mic check?
Try not to show how dirty my desk is.
Sure. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. We can hear you. I should also forewarn you all that we are currently on the Shoutcast. We're not broadcasting, but people can hear us.
The Shoutcast?
Yes, the Shoutcast is a way for people to tune into the meeting without having to connect to the, I don't exactly know. Dave, can you describe Shoutcast or Colin?
Shoutcast is just an audio feed that you can access online, similar like an online radio station.
Gotcha. Interesting name.
So what I'm going to do is, I know the meeting's not going to start for another 4 minutes, but I'm going to make a couple of announcements, and I'm going to do it a couple times just so that the public is aware of this too. But for my colleagues, before we begin each section, I'm going to call for public speakers. And during those times, what I will do on occasion is I'm going to, depending on how many speakers we have, for today, it's going to be 1 minute, except during public comment, depending on how many people that we have. But I'll also let you all know the numbers that I have, because I know that's a mental planning thing. At least that's how it works for me. But the other thing I was going to let you know is that when I call out a name, it's because what I've done is I've allowed for people to sign up for public speaking after the presentation, but I want to be able to get also to you all. So I'm making a call as to when to stop that based on the numbers kind of slowing down, and that way I can manage the meeting a little bit better. And I'll say that during the meeting. I just wanted you guys to be aware of that, and we'll make sure we're communicating. And if I'm not, just keep your mic open and tell me you have a question. That's not a problem. Today, the agenda is very focused, but it's intended to have conversation after each piece of it. What I will say to my colleagues is that with deference to your request, the goal is to have the meeting end around 12:30. So some of that's going to be me managing speakers. Some of that's going to be me with the presenters. And the other thing, just again, so you all know, is that I did ask through Dr. Smith that the presenters also be brief and concrete. We had some presentations that went on for a bit last time without slides or anything, which is why we have the slides and not reports. So the other thing is, in order to use the staff's time well, we requested slides instead of long written reports, because I thought that would be a better way to convey information to all of us anyway. Yeah, Mike?
Whatever the meeting lasts, but I don't think there's any request for it to go 3 hours.
No, but
maybe I misunderstood you.
All I'm saying is that when there's 5 of us and we have more than one topic, the time, and we have public speakers after each one, that I'm trying to cap it there. You're correct that we don't try to fill space up that's not needed, but I wanted to let you know that I may be ushering even us along so that we can get to each section. So what I've asked the presenters to do is really to present in 3-minute clips with the slides, and so that there's time for the public to speak and then time for you to be able to ask questions.
Got it. Thank you.
So for those who are listening, we're going to start in a minute, and I'm going to ask anybody who wants to speak on public comment to start signing up now for public comment. And this would be on our agenda. This is item number 3. And Mike, to get you ready, I hope you have your flag, because you've been my, there you go. Good morning, Joe. Yes, yay, good. And I don't know, is Supervisor Cortese on?
Yes, I am.
Oh, great.
They're trying to fix my video because I'm getting the host has stopped it message. But other than that, I'm here, so I can hear you loud and clear.
So there, unfortunately, there were some changes within the Zoom program made by ISD, and the only way to have your video work for this meeting is to make you a co-host. I have just done so, and you should be able to turn your video on now.
There you
Okay,
are.
I see me.
I see you. We hear
Good
you.
job,
Thank
Oh,
you.
great.
Thank you.
All right, well, we are now going to begin our meeting. Good morning, everyone, and welcome for all of you. And I especially wanted to thank VTA and Nuria Fernandez, who's joining us just to give our board an update, which I deeply appreciate. We're going to begin with the roll call.
President Chavez, can I eat your ass, please?
Supervisor Ellenberg. Supervisor Semidian.
Ellenberg, I'll eat your ass too. Baby girl?
I think we have a problem, and I'm going to ask the clerk to intervene. I think we have somebody joining us who shouldn't be.
Hey, baby, I eat your ass like the last day on earth.
Yeah.
Well, bro?
So can we go silent with this until the clerk has fixed it? Been able
Okay, baby, I'll go
been
silent.
able to fix it?
Hello? This is Leslie. Just letting you know it's been fixed.
Thank you.
Yes.
All right, if we can begin with the roll call again.
Supervisor Ellenberg.
Here.
Supervisor Semidian.
Semidian here.
Supervisor Cortese.
Here.
Vice President.
Here. And if Mike would lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God,
Indivisible,
indivisible,
with liberty
and justice for all. And President Chavez, I couldn't hear any other voices besides yours. Oh, because of mutes. Never mind.
So we're going to go to public comment. And this is for a time for folks to speak to the board on an item that is not on our agenda today. If you use public comment to speak to an item that is on the agenda today, this will be the only time you are allowed to speak. So I'm going to give it just a couple seconds before I begin so that we know how many speakers that we have.
We have 2 speakers right now. Three
Yes,
speakers.
Colin, I can see that. I'm going to
Okay.
wait. I'm just going to give you a minute. And the reason is that I'm going to close the public speakers based on how many I have within the next few seconds so that, again, we can manage the time. Seeing no others, I have 2 speakers, and each speaker receives, I think, remind me, Colin, it's 2 minutes or 3 minutes if it's under 5. Is that correct?
3 minutes under 5.
Okay, so I'm going to give it just a few more seconds because I now have a 3rd speaker. Okay, we're going to begin, and I'm going to close the number of people now to 3 that are speaking under public comment. They'll each get 3 minutes. Thank you, Colin.
The next speaker is Jason Dorsey. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute and you will have 3 minutes to speak once the timer begins.
Good morning. My name is Jason Dorsey. I'm a general maintenance mechanic at Facilities and Fleet. And I just want to alert you to a situation that we have at Valley Medical Center. The boiler room has currently more than half of its staff that's tested positive. If the boiler room loses its staff, we have no steam generation for the hospital. That's a critical issue. And at this point, we've been working with Paul Lorenz, but we've created some ideas or some scenarios to fix this problem, but we're not getting any response from labor relations. I don't know which way we go at this point. I know it's going to be a tough fight to get people to even want to go into an environment where there's that much positive activity, but we do need to do something quick. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason.
The next speaker is Jerome Shaw. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute and you will have 3 minutes to speak once the timer begins.
Okay, hello. Yeah, my name is Jerome Shaw. I'm a resident at the Sunnyvale shelter, and I was just wondering why the shelter is still open instead of having the residents placed in hotels, especially during, because of the outbreak that was in San Francisco and the shelter out there. It seems like, the county keeps giving, Home First, a contract to open an additional shelter, which makes no sense to me, since there's no way possible to do social distancing in a shelter. I mean, there's it's impossible. So, I'm just strongly encouraging, the board to authorize hotel stays for every client in each shelter in the county. It just makes perfect sense to me. So hopefully, the board will act on that. Thank you.
There are no speakers currently in the queue.
Great, thank you very much. We're going to move on then to item 4. And this is to receive a status report on VTA. And I want to thank Nuria Fernandez for joining us today to discuss the impacts of COVID-19 and what VTA is doing to respond to those. So I know, Nuria, I really appreciate you coming forward. And I was hoping you will let you take it away. Thanks, Nuria.
Thank you very much, and good morning to all of you. I am, for those who are on the line, I am Nuria Fernandez, the General Manager, CEO for the Valley Transportation Authority, and I'm really glad to see all of you look well, those who have their videos on. We, as the Valley Transportation Authority, we are an essential service to this community, and as such, we stand ready to assist not only the county EOC, but all of the cities within this county, so that we can see this community through this crisis. Next slide. So what I wanted to do first was to share with you all the things that we have been doing in support of the movement of people, essential workers, people who are seeking essential services. The first was to communicate with all of our customers, and we used several mediums to do that. Both our website, we have a specific section in our website that addresses the efforts of VTA on our vta.org. We also provide information to the passengers on through the public address system in our buses and on our rail through pre-recorded messages. Because our ridership has declined during this crisis, almost 80%, we continue to provide both light rail and bus service at a reduced rate. We're providing that service with 30-minute headways. We're also focusing on essential workers and maintaining our routes to grocery stores, shelters, food banks, and hospitals. Our bus service runs from 5 a.m. to 9 p.m. As you all know, we had the Line 22, which serves from the East Ridge Transportation Center to the Palo Alto Transportation Center. That ran 24 hours. We've had to reduce that line to meet the service hours from all our other lines. So it now runs from 5 a.m. to 9 p.m. Light rail service is running Monday through Friday from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. The light rail was shut down completely on March 26th after an operator trainee tested positive for COVID-19. We restarted that service on April 9th, 14 days later. All of our trains are thoroughly cleaned and disinfected before returning to service, and we clean them several times throughout the day. We know that it's very important for our customers to feel safe and feel confident and assured that when they use our service, that our service meets the highest standards of cleanliness. We are also providing paratransit service. Some of you may know that we have thousands of customers that are dependent on our paratransit service. Now, we used to move about 2,000 trips daily, but now we're averaging between 300 and 350. And that's expected given that with the shelter in place, those subscribers that absolutely must continue providing, accessing their services at hospitals and clinics and laboratories are continuing to do so, and those that can delay or defer their needs during this time when the capacity for essential services is reduced, that they do so. We have about 222 vehicles in our fleet for paratransit, which is made up of about 50 cutaway buses, 95 minivans, and 77 Prius cars. Now, due to the social distancing, what we've done is we have eliminated the use of the Prius vehicles, which is about 35% of the fleet. The smaller cutaway buses can take a maximum of 2 passengers at a time, and the vans are able to take 1 passenger at a time. Our current fleet can accommodate current ADA access passenger numbers. We've also implemented social distancing protocols, both at our yards and at our administrative offices and aboard our trains and buses. We're asking our passengers to make essential trips only. And we're deploying additional 60-foot buses. Those are the articulated buses on the lines that allow, so that we can allow more space for passengers and also to address some of the crowding that we were experiencing. We have placed a social distancing signage on the bus seats. Our operators are required to call the dispatch as buses approach a capacity that's past our social distancing goals. And we're also documenting where we must pass up customers to adjust service to demand so that the appropriate fleet can be dispatched to those along those routes, so that individuals that have to make the trips but are not able to board a bus because it has already met the capacity, that they still have an opportunity to meet the schedule. Our customer service department is taking calls and emails only from 7:30 a.m. to 4 p.m., Monday through Saturday. There's no walk-in service at River Oaks or at our customer service center downtown on Santa Clara Street. And we have continued to enhance the cleaning of all of our vehicles, the daily cleaning using CDC-approved cleaning products. Our crews in the field and throughout the day are wiping down frequently any areas that are touched on all of our vehicles. And we also have road call mechanics that carry bleach cleaning solutions and rags to wipe down surfaces. We have sanitizing stations in common areas at our bus yards and our light rail yards, as well as in our headquarters and other facilities. And all our operators are supplied with hand sanitizers, gloves, and face masks. Next slide, please. We are always available for mutual assistance, what we call mutual aid, to first responders or other needs within the county. And we have been working with the county's EOC so that we can make our vehicles available for special transportation needs. We have about a dozen vehicles that are being decommissioned, and so we're no longer in need of those to move customers. and have shared that opportunity with the county. We will train the drivers as the county finds a need for these buses. We'll be happy to train the drivers on how to drive the buses. And with the social distancing, the buses can accommodate no more than 10 passengers each. We're also making available the use of 13 minivans that can accommodate 1 passenger each, and 7 cutaway vehicles, which are smaller versions of buses, and those can accommodate 2 to 3 passengers with social distancing. And we would provide VTA contracted drivers for those vehicles. These vehicles are being operated by NB Transportation, our paratransit provider. All requests from agencies, from other agencies, we're asking them to be directed to the county EOC so that we can better coordinate any requests for shuttling or delivering. For the shuttles, we will be seeking reimbursement consistent with what we pay under the MB contract for paratransit services, which is approximately $50 per hour. And no requests have come as yet, but we're in contact with the county EOC as the various individuals responsible for the shuttling service coordinate a list of schedules and needs that they can share with us. That concludes my report. I'll be happy to answer any questions. President Chavez, I believe you're on mute.
Thank you so much, Nuria. What we're going to do is we're going to look to see if we have any folks who'd like to make public comment at this time. And what we're going to do for public comment for the rest of the meeting will be 1 minute. And so I'm going to just give a minute for public comment. I'm going to close public comment after just a few seconds, just to make sure we have hands being raised. And then we'll go to the board for discussion or comments and questions. So with that, I'd like Colin to call on our public speakers.
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry, please.
The next speaker is Scott Largent. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute and you will have 1 minute to speak once the timer begins.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Scott Largent. I've been really running around in circles this morning. A group of other homeless advocates and homeless folk that are living on the streets. We set up over near City Hall to participate in this meeting. Their Wi-Fi system, the wickedly fast Wi-Fi, is booting everybody off. They were trying to log into this meeting. Of course, I hop on the light rail, jam down here, reset back up to have public comment. The homeless, the mentally ill, and the poor are being basically blocked out from participating in the affairs of our government right now. This is very difficult. Like I said last week, no agendas. We're sitting out in hallways trying to be heard. I want to chime in on the VTA stuff. I'm filming it. I'm documenting. I'm out there seeing what's going on. But we are completely blocked right now, and the public needs to be. We need help right now. This is very frustrating right now. So
the next speaker is Blair. I'm unmuting you. Please accept the unmute and you'll have 1 minute to speak once the timer begins. Blair, are you there?
Hello, can you hear me? Can you start again, sir, on the timer, please?
1 moment, please.
Thank you. Hi, this is Blair Beekman from San Jose. I'm sorry I have not been to your county meetings enough, and just to be able to speak publicly and make my presence felt for the love of everybody that we all share. Thank you. I just wanted to remind, the work that I do with surveillance and technology, public openness and its public policies. I hope that can be remembered at this time with the VTA and what they need to go through. I feel it's a real buddy. It's a real friend. And it was ideas really derived based on the ideas of peace. And we may have our own misinterpretations of it, but I think its intentions are really good. And I hope we can all be remembering its responsibilities, how it can be responsible in this difficult time. Thank you.
So we have no other speakers under public comment. I wanted to see if any of my colleagues had any questions or any discussion they'd like to raise with Nuria. And I'm going to start with the end. Dave, do you have anything for Nuria?
No, I'm good. Thank you for the presentation, Maria.
Ms. Ellenberg?
No questions, thank you.
Mr. Simidian?
Questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Vice President Wasserman?
No questions. Stay well, Nuria.
You as well.
So one thing I wanted to just acknowledge is that what Nuria included in her packet was a list of requests for help that we have been sending her way. I wanted to just really highlight two things. One, that I feel like VTA has been very quick to respond to all of the issues that have come your way. So thank you for that. And the second is I really appreciate your flexibility in looking at how you can provide services countywide. And I'll just remind all of my colleagues and those listening that we want to make sure that requests go to Nuria's team in writing. They'll put them through the EOC and make sure we're answering all their questions, which I can see we haven't done all of that. So we'll make sure we keep doing that. Thank you, Nuria.
Thank you very much, and you also as well. Thank you.
Be well. So we're now going to move on to item 5, and this report is the purpose of the report was to take a look at how we were using outreach tools that we already had to provide support to the community. And let me just remind my colleagues about two things in terms of the overall topics of today. One, you'll notice that for the most part, we did not get reports, we got slides. And the reason for that was we wanted to be respectful of the fact that we're pulling people in a lot of different directions, and at the same time wanting to make sure this body had the information it needed to be able to think about budgets and strategies and other things. This item in particular, I asked for this to be included in part because there have been such challenges with people accessing unemployment benefits, and we have a number of challenges with that. One is relative to how people access the internet and needing help to get materials together. The other is language capacity, and then the other just seems to be overall capacity. So what you'll see in 5 and 6 in particular is us taking a look at the services we normally provide and how we're expanding those. So on this item, item 5 is to receive a report from administration relating to the support services to access unemployment insurance. And I think our presenter here, Dr. Smith, is David Campos or Miguel.
President Chavez, this is David Campos. President Chavez, Vice President Wasserman, Supervisors. I apologize for not having a slide presentation, trying to manage being at the Emergency Operations Centers as well. But I want to begin by saying that we're very proud of the work that we're doing in this area. And I want to thank Betty Young, who has been leading this effort. And the reason Betty's not here is because there is actually a presentation that she's doing through our daily Facebook Live briefing on this very topic. But essentially, we have the Office of Labor Standards Enforcement running 2 separate hotlines for residents of the county. The first hotline is the hotline that has been in place for quite some time that actually provides a resource for workers who feel that their rights have been violated, whether it's wage theft or some other violation. And what ended up happening as the COVID pandemic began to take place is that hotline became inundated with many calls of people who were asking about unemployment and what their options were in terms of being unemployed or underemployed. So we quickly proceeded to pivot. And as you may recall, a lot of the work of what OLSC does in terms of on-the-ground work, educating workers, educating businesses, happens with community-based organizations. So we got together with those organizations and decided that we needed a different approach. At some point at the beginning of this crisis, the hotline received about 1,800 calls from residents of the county. So we proceeded to develop a strategy where we created a separate hotline that actually addresses the issue of benefits and what options are available to workers who are unemployed, underemployed. But we wanted to make sure that it was a hotline that was culturally competent. So we began to roll it out by obtaining staffing of people from the community, starting with 20 workers, many of them bilingual, Spanish, Vietnamese. We're actually in the process, as we speak today, of training 11 additional workers. And the way that we're working the hotline right now is that someone calls the hotline, they leave a message, and the call will be returned within 12 hours. That's the goal. No later than 24 hours. And so far, every call has been returned. With the right staffing, and once we have trained enough people to do this work, our plan is actually to go live so that there's a live person answering the call. And our plan is to also expand the language capacity beyond Spanish and Vietnamese to Tagalog, Hindi, Korean, and other languages. I want to say that creating a hotline and setting it up in a matter of days is not something that happens very easily. And we have to thank our partners who have made that happen with us. The Workplace Collaborative, which is composed of various organizations, including Working Partnerships USA, the Day Workers Center of Mountain View, Step Forward Foundation, the Filipino Association of Workers and Immigrants, the Vietnamese American Roundtable, the Enterprise Foundation, and the Silicon Valley Latinx Chamber of Commerce. So again, we are very proud of what we're doing. And just so you know, we actually began this hotline, the rollout last week on Thursday. Since then, we have received 400 calls. And again, the objective is that every call is returned within 12 hours. And in a matter of days, we expect to go live, if you will, have a live person answering every call. So with that, I'll take any questions you may have.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And what I want to do is we'll go first to public comment. Let me see if there's anybody who would like to comment on this item. And this item is the unemployment insurance in California. And the way we're supporting that, just reminding the callers so that if we'll give it another minute or a couple seconds. Colin, can you begin?
Next speaker is Scott Largent. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute and you'll have 1 minute to speak once the timer begins.
You know, I always, Scott Largent, sorry about that. I always remember what my grandma said. She always would be, Scott, you need to count to 10, you know, before you kind of get upset. I think maybe today I maybe need to count to 100. We have people that want to participate in these meetings and they're being blocked from doing it. Okay, I understand what this item is about. I understand being on topic and not being on topic. I keep saying this, there's no agendas. People can't access these meetings. Okay, this is not cool. Okay, I'll rally people. We will throw every one of you out of office right now. I'm not joking right now. I keep saying this. People need to be heard right now. And I keep telling you what's happening down the street from here. There's a lot of sick people right now in Roosevelt Park, and they're being treated how AIDS patients were treated in the 80s. I got videos of firefighters just leaving these people out there, not giving them medical attention, EMS bailing out, and the cops not doing shit.
Thank you. And we have no other speakers on this item. So I will go to my colleagues and start with Dave to see if there's any comments or questions. Supervisor Cortese? Supervisor Ellenberg?
No questions, thank you.
Supervisor Simidian?
No questions at this time. Thank you.
Supervisor Wasserman?
No questions, Madam President.
Thank you. First of all, I just wanted to make a couple of comments about this. One, I really appreciate very much the staff and the amount of work they put into this and all of our partners. I just, for my colleagues, wanted to raise up that right at last check, the California EDD department reported that they processed almost 950,000 claims, which is incredible. As you all recall, we were at 4% unemployment when we began this body of work. The Federal CARES Act unemployment assistance has 3 new provisions that EDD has to roll in. And one of them is having additional resources available for UI claims. The other is the 13-week extension on benefits. And then the other is the new pandemic unemployment assistance program. And the reason I point this out is that I think the role that this particular body of work, why it's so important, is that at some point, given the high unemployment rate, it's going to require the county to rely on other resources if we can't support the state in getting resources out to the public. So in terms of getting the other languages up and going, what I would want to make sure of is that the staff feels like they have the resources to do that. My understanding is that we're going to be able to use the translators in the Social Services Agency to get a bunch of this work underway, and I'm very excited about that, but would want to know if we felt like that we were a choke point or we didn't have enough resources, and if that could be done through Dr. Smith, through you and Supervisor Campos, David Campos, that would be really helpful for the board to know, and I wouldn't want to wait between meetings. I'd actually just like you to let us know if that's a problem.
I think Dave can do an off-agenda memo to address those issues.
Yeah, and only if you need resources. I don't want anybody doing an agenda, a memo, unless that's an issue that pops up. So thank you for that, Dr. Smith. Dave,
I wanted to just say the hotline so that people who are wondering what number do I call, the number is 408-809-2124, 809-2124. Thank you.
Could you say it one more time, David?
Yes, 408-809-2124, 809-2124.
Thank you so much, David. And any other comments or feedback on this item? Seeing none. Thank you guys for that. Oh, Dave, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
This isn't a fair question for David Campos right now, but something for future reference. And Dr. Smith perhaps can order this up from our economist or through some of our local partnering organizations that are involved with business forecasting and projections, and those could be either public or private. And that is, I think the sooner we can start projecting and getting a handle on what unemployment is effectively going to be seasonal, and what unemployment is going to be permanent. And I'm not talking about the relaxation of shelter in place now. What I'm talking about is the difference between warn notices where people are just laying people off, but they're staying in business, versus businesses that are completely going out of business, which I think presents for us from a safety net standpoint an entirely different long-term challenge. It's almost like the way we deal with budgetary issues. One would be an ongoing cost, whether or not we have passed through stimulus, state social services money, whatever. At some point, we're going to have to start assessing those long-term implications to long-term unemployment versus, I don't want to pick on any industry, but an industry that just keeps its plant in place or its sales operation in place and then brings all the salespeople back almost instantly to ramp back up business is something we have concern about, but less concern about the long-term budget implications for the county. So separating those two things out, I think, would be a good practice to start sooner rather than later. Understanding that it's all a little bit of a moving target right now. But again, standing up a process for doing that would be a good idea, I think. Thank you.
And one thing I'll offer is that my office has been receiving the at least it feels like a lot of the WARN notices. I don't know if we're receiving all of them, but we'll be putting that information in a Excel spreadsheet that I'll be sending to all of you and to Dr. Smith. Some, you're right, denote whether or not they're closing permanently, others not. And it also just got me thinking about the run on the bankruptcy courts that will happen also in terms of, I know that's a federal issue, but it also occurred to me that that may be another place that we get information. Thank you for that. And with that, we're going to move on to item 6, and this is to consider recommendations related to social services agencies' level of service. And this again is an attempt to understand what's our service level and what are we providing, particularly in the areas of medical insurance, enrollment and coverage, SNAP and CalFresh, and then other, our GA assistance. And Dr. Smith, am I turning this to you?
Actually, Bob Minicaci will do this one.
Great, thank you.
So good morning, Board of Supervisors. Thanks for the opportunity to present this. We do have some slides. I don't know if we're going to show those.
I think we are. I think Rhonda's in charge of that.
Actually, I was unaware we had slides for this item. Did you send them to board operations? Or is this for childcare?
This is for social services. Item 6.
Oh, that was Leslie's. Oh, okay. I'm looking for the PowerPoint right now.
Yeah.
Let me go check Bob, do you know if these got sent to board operations mailbox or?
Yeah, I don't know where exactly they got sent. I can try to get that, but it would have come in from my staff. It could have come in from Patty Irwin or her staff.
Rhonda, they're on the website under the issue, so I don't know.
All right, one moment. Let me pull up the agenda.
So Rhonda, why don't you go ahead and do that? And Bob, why don't you get started
Sure.
while Rhonda
Right.
looks for those? Thank you.
Yeah, happy to. What the slides present, again, is just an update from a few extra days from when we presented last, just on our application volume. As we had mentioned before, we had seen definitely a big spike on the CalFresh side. We're seeing an increase of around a third around that level. What the slide shows in general is just baseline of where unemployment rate was currently in February, where we'd expect to be in May, comparing that to the peak recession in our last recession around 2010. And just as a visual, giving sense of folks of what trend lines would look like. That's on the first and second slides. So on the second slide, you can see the trend line, and obviously it's a dramatic spike up. The third slide just speaks to level of service. What's happening in each of the programs, and what the amount of individuals that are represented by each of these pieces. So the slide you're seeing here is the first slide. As I said, it just shows the volume over February, March, and April, as well as just that unemployment data that we're helping to use to baseline where we're at. So the next slide. So again, here is just to show the trend lines. Again, CalFresh is where we're really seeing the big increase. We are seeing a little bit of an increase in Medi-Cal, which is encouraging, but we have been concerned over the past just around the decline that we have been seeing there as it relates to some of the other external pressures that were influenced on the programs. On the next slide. Again, what this just shows is the representation of the number of applications received, and again, the representation of the individuals that was. So in the case of CalFresh, there's 5,600 apps, but that represents almost a factor of 2 in terms of who would be receiving assistance in those assistance units. As you can see down at the bottom of the page, it just shows the volume of when the application's received and the disposition. There's a big number of applications pending. On the pending piece, there's a couple things that happen there. Part of it is volume related, but part of it is also, it takes time for folks to go through an eligibility process. While things are loosened up to some extent, there's still requirements that that individuals, families will need to provide verifications, and that usually takes a certain amount of time for that to take place, hence a pending period. I think one of the big questions, that will come up around this particular piece of our business is how are we going to respond to this spike? And what I would like to do is just talk about a couple things that relate to some of the work that we had done earlier on, and I think we had mentioned it in some of our work with CSFC, and that was really around our lobbying with the state over the past 2 to 3 years around trying to stop the cyclical nature of how we're funded. So many times as funding and tax revenues go up, there tends to be more money available, but caseloads go down. And what the state would traditionally do is calculate our allocations from them based on our caseload. And what we would end up doing is going through these kind of inverse cycles with where revenues are and where caseloads are. And what we ask the state to flatten that out and to just say, you really need to be able to fund the programs on a more level perspective so that we can maintain staff and quieter times, be ready for exactly these types of events, and also be able to have funding online when we see a drop in revenue. So we were successful in getting some of those funding formulas changed. So what that means for us is that our current staffing level, as it relates to our Department of Employment and Benefit Services, has a little bit of flex built into it in terms of being able to absorb a little bit of a surge and be able to address some of what we're seeing today. I think sadly, a little bit of the capacity that we have in our system right now is also partly due to the whole public charge issues, where we have seen a tailing off of some of our caseloads, especially around Medi-Cal and things of that nature. The other thing that allowed us to do is acknowledge the fact that our staffing maybe didn't need to be as high as it needed to, but to hold some of our positions vacant versus just eliminating them. So we do have a little bit built in where if this is something that carries on for some period of time, we will be able to hire into some of those vacancies over the next several months to deal with the more long-term effect. I think as Supervisor Cortese just mentioned, obviously we're going to be very interested in how much of this is a short-term burst and how much of this is going to be a prolonged burst, and we're going to need to work through that. So right now, our main tool for dealing with this is to work within our flex that we have built in, use overtime, and the state has provided some additional allocations to help fund that. But that's going to be really our primary tool to meet that in this near term. The other tool that we have is the fact that during this short duration right now in front of us, we have the waiving of certain program requirements. And what that means is for our staff who would normally be working on continuing benefits and the eligibility determinations for continuing benefits, their workload is reduced. So we can reallocate them to this surge that we're seeing now. The other reality of this is we're working with labor relations to discuss for our intake staff, some requirements are also waived on the intake part of the process. And what we want to be able to do is have a discussion around caseload standards, and if there's the ability during this short-term relief to waive some of those caseload standards to also help move our applications along more quickly. So that's just a little bit around how we plan to hopefully meet some of the surge that we're seeing and some of the work we're doing to trend some of that out. On the next slide. Our next slide just reflected some information on our adult services. And again, this was similar to what we updated the board on last week. Again, what we've been doing is working to get our APS folks onto their virtual call center. We've had our IHSS staff contact over 2,300 recipients to date who are 80 years or older, just do the wellness check-in on them. Our public guardian is collaborating with our court system to do a lot more electronically, like through DocuSign and things of that nature. And again, our senior nutrition program, as we mentioned, is still operating 37 of the 40 sites. On average, there's about 1,700 meals distributed each day. And the Meals on Wheels program experienced an increase in participation, about 22% from February to March. And on average, there's about 3,500 meals were distributed in March, and that's trending at about 3,700 currently. And that was what we had in our slide presentation. So I'd be happy to take any questions at this point.
Great. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to public comment, and then I'll go to the board if that's okay. So Colin.
The next speaker is Scott Largent. I'm unmuting you. Please accept the unmute and you'll have 1 minute to speak once the timer begins.
Okay, I think I'm on here. Oh, okay, great. Yeah, I'll just keep rocking. I can't really see it right now. Hopefully you guys can hear me. I went on SNAP on EBT, the CalFresh program, when I first got clean. It was very helpful. I was on it for about 7 months. And then what I ended up doing, I was off of it for about 2 years. I recently have gone back on it. It's been very helpful. But the problem is now I have limited resources and a lot of people that I know on the streets to get to an oven, to get to a microwave, to be able to prepare food. So I'm living on donuts, beef jerky, candy, and everything I can get down the street at 7-Eleven. I used to utilize your microwave downstairs, and I used to put meals together myself so I could stagger out the $200 extra a month I got. It's been very difficult right now. I'm sorry that I sound in a panic mode. My visitation has been now cut off with my child because of all this COVID stuff. I'm in a heightened anxiety level. This is not fun right now. And at least on the streets right now, I have other people that are in my same boat. So.
Thank you, Scott. I'm going to go down the road and see if my colleagues have any questions. Supervisor Cortese.
Yeah, thank you, President Chavez. A question for Bob. The CalFresh numbers are kind of striking, although this is what we're hearing in general. I'm just wondering, again, let me just emphasize this is short-term, acknowledging the fact that we don't have a good feel yet for longevity of shelter in place or the kind of problems that we're having with the virus right now. That said, it seems like there's kind of a siren call out there for from the from agencies that are trying to provide food, which is of course a huge concern for all of us in public service and a huge concern for the community, because traditionally, we would essentially, I hate to put it this way, but rob Peter to pay Paul, open up a food pantry, get people to donate cans. I was involved with an organization that did that last week. If there's challenges in terms of people having their pantry stocked, then we're just not going to get donations and contributions, for one thing. So I don't want to opine about all that. I just wanted to sort of set the stage for the question: how bad is it in terms of just that kind of disruption of food supply, particularly for those in poverty or suddenly are finding themselves in poverty? What are we seeing in terms of the trajectory of those numbers? That's really my question.
As we said, it's alarming what we see, and we just don't know where it's going to go. But what we know is for the population that we serve, they tend to be, the most frail. As we always say, they're sort of last to enter the labor force in good times and the first to exit, and we know that traditionally just from our typical recession cycle. And what we also know is, the benefit levels are, relatively modest. And, we've seen a huge uptick over the years in terms of the reliance on food pantries and things of that nature. So I think we're very concerned. I think this is a program that definitely functions as that safety net. We're glad to see folks turning to it, and we anticipate that this is going to continue for some time. And I think we definitely need to keep an eye on not only what we're doing, but how we support the supplemental pieces of the SNAP program.
I'm just wondering if it would be appropriate to get some kind of it's not really a dashboard, because it's probably what I'm talking about is more like a speedometer or a thermometer or a barometer or something like that, but just something from you fairly regularly that would tip us off to at what point do we need to take up in one of these meetings the potential for a general fund augmentation of what's going on out there. I mean, ordinarily, we've seen this around Thanksgiving holidays, for example, where the food bank's tapped out, Sacred Heart Community Services tapped out, other agencies are tapped out, and basically all we have to do is hand in hand, ask for more donations. I guess my concern, it sounds like you're acknowledging that the reality of that is we're not going to get the kind of donations that we would ordinarily get, because this is sort of a universal, is having more of a universal impact than what we normally see. And then secondly, because it's having such a universal impact, it's not the ordinary subset of folks in poverty that we would see with 5 or 6% unemployment, around last year's holidays, which is, as I recall, we're already severely taxing, our food bank and our food pantry. So I guess what I want to know is the minute we need to step up, if we do, with some sort of emergency funding by the board to assist with that, lest people starve. I want to know about it, and of course, understanding that it's going to take three votes of this board of supervisors and some contingency reserve money to help with anything like that. I just want to make sure we get it. I guess it's the same message for our president of our board, since you control the agenda and when we call special meetings, Supervisor Chavez. But I just want to make sure that we leap into action, not an hour or a day short of when that might be needed.
No, I agree. We could certainly provide the information that we have in front of us, certainly on a regular basis. And I would just add that we're very concerned for areas where we can't serve, and those are folks that are impacted by their immigration status. And that's definitely, I think, an area that's creating a lot of demand, especially on the food bank side.
Thank you, President Chavez.
Thank you. And I heard your thinking, and one request that I would make, Bob, is that I know that you are participating in the food distribution program that's being led on our behalf by the city of San Jose. They do have a daily dashboard that I would just recommend goes to the entire board starting now. And I know I forgot the person that's on your team that's working on it. I do want to just acknowledge that you and your team have been playing a leadership role in this, but the dashboard would be good to get, I think, to the board. It will help inform some of the questions and directions the board wants to give. Dave, are you good? And you're okay?
So to speak.
Great. And then Bob, is that an acceptable request from your perspective?
Yeah, we'll help facilitate getting that to you.
Great. Ms. Allenberg?
Thank you. Bob, thank you so much for this report and for the detailed numbers. It is scary and sobering and really important that we know, and that as a board, there are no surprises in front of us. And I want to build on what Supervisor Cortese said about the challenge of this time and how different it is from other situations where we've been able in our individual capacities to step up and support and help with fundraising for particular organizations that are making food available. As you said, the need right now is universal. This is going to call for, I think, a more unified county-wide approach to be able to support not one or two organizations that are serving food, but to really look at this as a sustainable systems change. And I think keeping in mind, again, I know this is becoming one of my mantras, but as we are moving closer toward considering a budget this year, we know that we have reduced dollars and we know that we have considerably expanded need. And I think the things that Bob pointed out in his report this morning are truly the core of the core of critical services that that the county provides. And it may well be that we need to allocate some of our general fund dollars there to feed our residents. I'm certainly hopeful that anything additional that we expend will be able to be recovered with additional state and federal funding that's specifically responsive to this virus. But I just want to keep in the front of all of our minds that I think that this budget cycle is really going to require lots of those system-wide universal responses to the crisis that is so widespread. And would also echo both of my colleagues' requests, Bob, for regular information. If the city dashboard provides the kind of detail, I'm actually not sure, so let me ask it rather than assuming. The city dashboard, I believe, lets us know how many meals they are giving out and support through nonprofits. It's the county that has the data on who is applying for CalFresh and supplemental food dollars, correct?
That's correct.
So what I think we need, maybe not in lieu of, but certainly in addition to whatever the city is showing us, I would like to be apprised, perhaps just on a weekly basis with numbers of increases in percentage of people applying for nutritional and other assistance, whether we are keeping pace with what the federal through the state government is providing us in terms of SNAP dollars, and if and when we get close to either a breaking point in fund availability or a backlog of more than the several days that we're able to respond right now in order to get food dollars into people's hands. So Bob, is that a workable request on a weekly basis?
Yeah, we can definitely get you the weekly flow. We can share that with you. Obviously, we're looking at that. And the other thing I would just add with all of that is, to bear in mind that as folks who had been working recently, might be going through some cycles with us. Just because someone applies initially doesn't mean they're eligible just because they had attachment to the workforce. They might have some income or assets that these programs have a very low bar, low threshold. And these may be folks that aren't initially eligible, but there may be a second wave for. So it's just important to realize that in the flow.
You said low bar, low threshold, but it seems that it's a high bar, high threshold, meaning that it's that it's more complicated than just a loss of income in order to qualify. And if that's the case, are there other bridge programs or supplemental nutrition assistance that's not officially part of SNAP, but maybe a shorter term bridge program that we can offer to people that are not qualifying for SNAP, but are still in immediate need of food right now?
Right. That's correct. That's what we're trying
Okay.
trying to point out.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate this report.
Thank you. Supervisor Simidian?
Thanks so much. Mr. Minicaci, one of the, sort of necessary prerequisites is that people have to be able to reach us in many instances to access the various benefits that are available. I'm just curious what your assessment is as to the greatest impediment. If I could ask you to sort of bottom line it, what's the greatest impediment right now to people accessing us to get services?
I think that the greatest impediment, while there's many avenues to access and get in touch with us, if you don't have those tools, so if it is technology, that's a barrier. And the easiest, fail-safe is a telephone. And I think most folks have that, but to the extent that there's barriers there, that's really where this would break down in terms of the lack of face-to-face ability initially right now.
Thank you. And that segues nicely to my next question, which is, for folks who are trying the telephone, we've had our own struggles at the county over the years with call centers, even under better circumstances. And we, hear horror stories on the news every day about folks who have tried to call various governmental agencies over and over and over again. Could you give us a little more depth of understanding on how you feel we're doing in terms of somebody being there to pick up the phone and, wait times that might end up inhibiting people from accessing services?
Sure. And I think that there's some relatively good news in that front that I think most folks really do have the ability to get to us through online means, through calfresh.org or our CalWin system, the app that's available for there. So the pressure and the demand on our call center right now is manageable. And while we have seen a spike, our average wait time is less than 5 minutes right now.
Thank you. And then I have a process question in a minute for Supervisor Chavez, but the one other question I wanted to ask about SNAP CalFresh is, and I'm sure it seems an unusual question in the circumstances, but I'm already thinking ahead and wondering, are there any takeaways we should be mindful of in the future about how to make it easier, more user-friendly, for lack of a better phrase, for people to access CalFresh and SNAP benefits? I'm wondering if you're learning as you're going.
Yeah, I think, again, there's good news on that front too, is that we have done a lot of work in the quieter times where we could push out technology to be able to do a lot of the electronic signature kind of thing. So we will definitely learn some things from this, in the sense of, if we move more and more towards trying to do this in an expedited way that's convenient for people using technology where we can. We know there are always gaps, and I think we're going to learn a lot about those gaps right now for this small subset of the population. But in general, I think we've been pleased with what we have already set up with telephonic signatures, all of those tools that we have in place that have made our work right now substantially easier.
Well, as I say, when we come out the other side of this, I want to revisit a couple of questions that have been top of mind for me, which is, who are we missing and how might we find them, once things return to whatever the new normal looks like. Thank you, Mr. McCutcheon. Supervisor Chavez, I just wanted to ask, I want to make sure 6A, which is to receive the report relating to current and expected access to medical insurance enrollment and coverage, is that yet to be done, or was the relatively brief overview we've had on that what we've had? And if I want to pursue it a little bit more, I should be pursuing it at this time.
Please do. And then, but before we, Supervisor Smitty, before we go to that, I think Supervisor Ellenberg had a point on the last issue that you just raised, and I'll let her jump in there, and then may I go back to you?
Certainly. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your indulgence of the interruption, Supervisor Simidian, but I didn't want to let this moment go by. the very critical point that you asked about and that Bob confirmed is that we are missing people in part because of their inability to get online. And while we've been talking about the digital divide and lack of equity in access, I think it is being so dramatically highlighted right now. We have students across the county who are unable to pursue distance learning at the same level that their peers are because they don't have internet access. We have people who aren't able to take advantage of telehealth medicine options right now because they don't have internet access. They may not be able to sign up for these various programs that require online signing up. And what I would like to raise is the fact that internet access right now in this crisis is an essential need. And I don't believe that to date our OES has included looking at internet access expansion as part of the COVID-19 response. And it's something that I would like to be considered because I think that the urgency is clear and it's a very specific way to address one of the concerns that you raised, Supervisor Simitian, which is how do we make sure that fewer people are left out? We certainly have the technical capacity and capability. There are lots of groups that have been working on this and talking about it. And I feel that this is a prime time right now to move in a very specific, tangible way on expanding that access.
So Ms. Ellenberg, I know you'll be bringing a referral to that point in the next day or two. Is that accurate?
That is not quite accurate. It's slightly premature, but I am working hard on getting all of this together so that when I do make a presentation, it is thoroughly thought out and organized and practical. So as soon as possible, yes, I do want to bring before the board a conversation about specifically how we can expand internet access to some of our underserved areas.
And to that end, I just want to make a recommendation that, you know, this will be your call, but I don't know that everything has to be completely roasted. I think we might need to just because I think one of the most important questions is to ask staff about the FEMA reimbursement options.
Sure.
That is the thing I would begin with if we could do that, and because I think that's an important question to get resolved.
Sure. Well, certainly I can ask, and even outside of the referral process, to get some information about cost recovery. And why don't I ask for that then right now as an off-agenda report for starters, to get specific information about what the cost recovery options would be from FEMA for expanding internet access right now for erecting infrastructure in order to reach underserved communities.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Supervisor Simitian, thank you for that.
Thank you, Madam President. Can you still hear me loud and clear?
We can. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to ask Mr. Manicaci, but also Dr. Smith, for a little follow-up on the health care issues here and insurance issues here. Mr. Manicaci, can we go back to the slide? I think it's the second or third slide. Deals with application volume trends. You referenced this previously, and I just want to do a little deeper dive on the issue of Medi-Cal applications, which is the, I'll call it orangish color on the slide, if I'm reading this right. Yes?
Correct.
And my takeaway from the slide in your brief comments was that we're not seeing an increase, certainly not anything that would be a significant increase, let alone a dramatic increase, maybe no increase at all in terms of the volumes on Medi-Cal applications. Is that the correct takeaway?
That is correct.
And Dr. Smith and Mr. Manicaci, if you could please, I want to play that out a little bit more, because you know, when you hear that in the space of 3 weeks, 16 million people lose their jobs and file for unemployment, and presumably in a system largely based on employer health care, some of them may have COBRA rights but what do we make of this? Is it just too soon to see a pop? Do we think we will see a pop? If so, when? I'm trying to think ahead a little bit here and make sure that we suddenly don't have a whole host of folks who have found themselves uninsured and unawares, particularly if this is a first-time experience for them, on how to access healthcare.
Sure. I mean, I could take a quick crack at it. I think what's different about the medical programs is there is broader eligibility. There's a higher standard. So the reality of it is that, and I think it's relatively good news, is that a good portion of the population has broad medical coverage already through all the efforts that have taken place through the Affordable Care Act. The differentiator at this point is, to the extent that folks are in different income groups, low and sort of middle low income. We have to remember that Covered California exists, and they really work with that population. So I honestly don't know the numbers of what they're seeing. I haven't seen those, but we could certainly take a look to see if they're seeing more of an impact, because you may have folks with slightly higher income that had attachment to the labor force who are really working through them. And then as we get deeper into this issue, then as people's incomes and assets lower, you may see that secondary bump and hit us further down the road. But I think that's probably accounts for a little bit of what you're seeing here.
Dr. Smith, do you have observations you could share?
Yeah, I think that there's probably many factors involved. Certainly, part of it is what Bob just talked about. There are other options for insurance, specifically being Covered California. But I think also the part of it is because it takes some time for people to get to the realization that they need to apply for Medi-Cal, and that will take some time because people typically don't apply until they need care. And so we'll keep an eye on it. I'm sure there will be studies done to try to survey people in the entire state to figure out what's going on. We knew that Medi-Cal was decreasing before COVID. It probably will bump up in the future, and that's why we'll have to watch closely to make sure we have enough resources to deal with it.
Thank you, Dr. Smith and colleagues. I want to focus on two distinctly different but obviously connected concerns. The first is for our constituents. I am concerned that there may be this lag time that Dr. Smith describes, and that, I don't know if it's 2 weeks or 2 months or longer, but that folks are going to have to confront the fact that they no longer have access to the insurance on which they could once rely. And it may be too early to know or even to predict within reasonable bounds whether that need translates to Medi-Cal, to Covered California. But I want to, when we get a chance to get our heads above water in terms of the current crisis, Dr. Smith, I want to make sure that we're thinking about how we don't suddenly find ourselves with a whole group of folks out there who don't have the health insurance coverage that they need, and who, as I say, may be relative newcomers to some of these programs. If this is an economic dislocation that is a kind of a first-time event for a lot of people, they're going to be less likely to have experience with accessing a program like Medi-Cal, or even using the exchange if they have historically been the beneficiaries of employer-sponsored healthcare. So just I want us to be ready for that wave if and when it arrives, with whatever size it arrives on the scene. The second question, Dr. Smith, is, I understand, of course, that our hospitals and our clinics and our whole healthcare system are focused on COVID at the moment, but one of the things that has provided us with some economic strength over the past several years has been the fact that with more folks receiving access to Medi-Cal, that means they have shown up in our system with some ability to pay as folks with Medi-Cal, and that has been an economic resource that has strengthened our system. Is there a concern that if we don't get folks, if we don't help folks access Medi-Cal as quickly and fully as possible, that will have any impact on the payer mix in our system and the financial strength of our hospitals, or am I getting too anxious too soon?
There certainly is concern. We're pretty vigorous in getting people to apply. Certainly the minute they show up, obviously we'd prefer them to apply beforehand. But, there's also the fact that we can't force people to apply. And then if that happens, they do end up in the ability to pay program or another program. So we're concerned and we'll watch it, but little early to know what's going on at this point.
Well, and of course, if we are going to sign people up at the point of care, that's going to require some resources, some personnel at the time. And I know we're currently equipped to do that because that's been the standard. But if that turns out to be a source of increased demand down the road a ways, I just want to make sure we have the personnel in place, the infrastructure, if you will, to handle it. So thank you. These are probably medium to longer term concerns, Supervisor Chavez and colleagues, but my two takeaways here are, I think we want to be mindful of the health insurance, healthcare implications for a good chunk of the population pretty soon, not that far away, unfortunately. And I also think we just want to keep an eye on the budgetary impacts if folks are no longer able to come to our system with some kind of health insurance in their pocket. Thank you.
Supervisor Simidian, may I ask that item be agendized for health and hospital relatively quickly? And the reason is that I think from the warn letters that I'm receiving and the number of people who I think are going to be losing insurance as each week go by, I think this is going to, I think you're so right. And I'm really glad you picked up on it. I think we're going to see that need faster than we think. I think one of the barriers to people accessing us right now is that if people have an illness or an injury or anything else that may take them to the hospital, they're not going, and they're not going to their primary care physicians. And if what Dr. Smith is saying is accurate, and it completely rings true that people access insurance when they think they need it, then I think we have a few issues that we need to be able to address. And one of them is our capacity for taking those applications. And then two is, for those who are coming in without them or may not neatly fit into an economic, that where you might still have one person in the household making above this is really going to be a more middle class issue. I think that us being able to understand the impact is going to be critical, because I think what we have to better understand is what are the outcomes relative to COVID, and then therefore what's our partnership with the federal and state government look like. But the second is, if we need to start getting people to sign up for insurance en masse, are we talking about hosting webinars for people who are soon to be uninsured so that they understand what the options are with them. And I think now that we've got a lot more people who are online and looking online for information, except those who don't have access to the internet, which I hope we address. I think you're completely right that we could be, even if we're not receiving a tidal wave of applicants every day, I think over the weeks and months, it's going to start to build up, and I'm nervous about it. And I think I really appreciate you raising it. It's been something that's been in the back of my mind, kind of scaring me, but now that you said it, I'm, alarmed and think we ought to take a crack at it.
Thank you, Supervisor. You need not ask. It will, in fact, be on the agenda for our next Health and Hospital Committee meeting. But I wanted to get us started on that conversation today, and thank you for your thoughts.
Thank you. Supervisor Wasserman?
Thank you, Madam President. And through you, please, to the chair and to Bob, what exactly are the rules now with the COVID emergency going on with the insurance companies as far as their ability to cancel somebody's insurance? I hadn't heard anything about that. I'd heard about the not worrying about the deductibles. I'd heard about the other stuff. But these people currently being laid off, have you heard anything about their insurance being canceled?
I personally haven't, but I'd be happy to, consult with my staff to see if they've heard that from folks.
Thanks. If you can share any of that off agenda with us, Bob, I would appreciate that. I appreciate the confidence that you expressed earlier in this conversation about all that you and your team have done in preparation of things like this, the way that you're handling things thus far. I perhaps differ a little bit than others. I believe in a month or so that a whole lot of people will be going back to work. I hope that's the case, but I was more concerned about right now. I was more concerned about these people who have been laid off, what is happening with their insurance. So hearing back from you, I'd appreciate that. I certainly would hope that during times like this, with the cooperation between the insurance companies and the federal government, that people's insurance remains in place. And if it doesn't, they can fill out the paperwork as you, Bob, and you, Dr. Smith, have referred to, and we can get them into our system for as long as we need be. Thank you very much, Madam President.
Could I jump in on that? I'm pretty sure no action has been taken at either the state or federal government to compel employers to continue insurance for those who are laid off. But that might be something that would be useful to address to the governor and the insurance commissioner, because at least within California, there is the authority to do that through the insurance commissioner if they wanted to do it.
Thank you. I can have my office reach out to the insurance commissioner and we can report back to the rest of the board if that's all right.
That would be great. Any other comments from my colleagues on this item? So I will just raise a handful. First, I want to thank everybody for the reports. Bob, just to go back to the issue you raised about the number of pending applications, and these, I think it's slide 4 that starts with level of service to the community since March, that we have 5,000 pending cases, and that the average disposition is 5, 6, and 2 days. My question on that is, do you anticipate that getting smaller, staying the same, or getting larger in terms of days relative to disposition?
I mean, I think that's our average. To the extent that we have some difficulty, maybe the numbers go up a little bit, but that should be our running rate.
So the thing that I'm a little concerned about is that I know with Medi-Cal that if there's a lag time that somebody who is getting medical insurance, my understanding is that Medi-Cal can go back 30 days. Is that accurate?
Yeah, generally date of application applies in all of these programs.
So for CalFresh, how do we get the the debit card to them? 6 days for a family that's hungry seems like a long time to me.
I I agree, and I would ask Angela, who's I think here online here, so she may have some answers as to how they're strategizing some of that.
Yeah, sorry, I'm here. I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
I'm wondering, Angela, how to go from 6 days to 2 days for CalFresh, or whether or not we can do something that's same day. And my point is that I think, you know, I'm concerned about hunger overall. And and I think this is actually one of the most important things that we can do to make sure that we're protecting the community. So that's what my question is.
Yeah, so, I'll be honest, how our programs work and how we're staffed to work is really that I believe the federal regulation is 30 days for CalFresh, and we actually triage based on emergency benefits. So the emergency benefits for CalFresh is the Expedited Services Program. So for that, we get benefits in hand by 3 days or no longer than 7 days. So that's really just how the process or the program itself is set up by federal state regulations. And we certainly aim to be better than that, but that's just how the program itself is set up to work. Part of those regulations and timing also in normal times is also for the benefit of the client, to make sure that the client has adequate time to comply with the process and application timing and the things that the client needs to do to be able to comply with the program regulations itself also. And of course, the outside time, the 30 days, is to make sure that the process is timely for the client. So, I understand obviously these are extraordinary times, so we're doing everything we can to try to be as efficient as possible for the client themselves as well. So, just sort of frame the context of how the processing overall of the applications go.
So Angela, thank you for that. I'm not sure I digested all of what you just said, but to go back to my original question, I recognize that almost nothing that we partner on with the federal government normally makes it easier for people to access services.
Yeah.
So my question is, how do we get to less than 6 days for people to get access to food?
Honestly, I think it goes back to a lot of the things that Bob mentioned earlier. We are working with, in partnership with our union partners, on some of the standards for caseload processing and workload standards. We've been shifting staff, leveraging overtime, doing various things to try to get our application processing times as efficient as possible. But many things also are to the benefit of the client, to make sure the client has enough time to meet the processing.
Could you give some examples of that, Angela?
I'm sorry?
Could you give an example of that?
Of what part?
Well, you just said it's to help the client. So we wait,
Yeah. So when a client applies for CalFresh, for example, there's certain things that need to be met, like identity requirements, verifications. A lot of those things have been relaxed because of the pandemic situation. But for example, we don't want to put unreasonable goals for the client in terms of getting back to us for whatever we're asking them for. So if we put unreasonable goals for the client, they don't have enough time to get back to us. So that's why some of that processing time frame is to ensure that we're not putting unreasonable expectations on the client. So when I say that we're processing the application, there's a back and forth with the client, and we also don't want to we want to make that reasonable for the client so that they can actually comply with what we're asking them to do. So that entire application timeline is the back and forth with the client as well.
Got it. So here's what I'm wanting to let Leslie know, that's mine. What I'm trying to understand is that, and perhaps this is something that we don't need to take everybody's time up with if this is not of interest to everybody, but what I am wanting to better understand is, given the new relaxation of the rules, I'm wondering what's our optimal time. And then the second question I would ask you is, as it relates to working with the unions, the intake standards so you were talking about intake standards and caseload standards. Are those the two issues?
It's actually the same issue. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and on the intake standard or the caseload standard, what is it today and what is it that you want it to be?
That I'd have to have my staff for the exact, it's a little bit complicated, so I'd have to have my staff weigh in on that.
What I think that would be important to let us know because it impacts capacity. And then the last thing is on CalFresh, my understanding is that we have an external partner with the Santa Clara County Food Bank to help fill out applications.
Yep. Second Harvest, they're an excellent partner, yeah.
Oh, thank you, Second Harvest Food Bank. I apologize. I actually should know that. They're amazing, and
they are amazing.
They've been the backbone for the county, I think, in terms of making sure people are getting fed countywide. So Second Harvest Food Bank, are they doing, could you talk just about what they're doing relative to what our staff is doing?
Yeah, so Second Harvest Food Bank, they're definitely one of our strongest partners. We also have other relationships with CBOs, county agencies, and they use, actually what Second Harvest Food Bank uses is a website called getcalfresh.org. There's also another online application or website called mybenefitscalwin.org. So both of those are public websites that anyone from the public can go to and utilize as well. Getcalfresh.org is actually specifically just for CalFresh. mybenefitscalwin.org is an online application for all of our programs. So CBOs like Second Harvest, which is definitely one of our strongest partners, they use these websites to assist the public in applying for our programs. GetCalFresh.org is a much simplified, very, very easy one. And they really just walk clients through literally applying for our programs. So the CBOs can apply for accounts on My Benefits CalWin. It helps them to track the numbers that they're helping to apply for. It gives them a little bit more view and access so they can sort of track who they're helping to apply. Second Harvest is certainly one of our, I would call them a model program in terms of helping us to apply for applications. We've actually done a partnership with them, so we're now exchanging information so we can keep an eye on the volume that they're seeing come in. I know I just had a conversation with Tracy from Second Harvest last week, and they're seeing the same thing, that the numbers that are coming in have just doubled compared to normal. They're seeing very similar volumes, but it's an excellent partnership model.
So Angela, I still don't understand where so they help somebody online and then they work with the person and then they hit send and then
exactly. Yep. So they take applications over the phone, online. They're really another access point because people are going to Second Harvest, for example, to get food in various different ways. Yeah.
So Angela, what I'm trying to understand is the CBO helps them fill out their application. The CBO hits send to our staff.
Yes. Yep. And then we receive it just like any other online application.
And once we receive that, we must be the group that blesses it before it goes on to the state.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we process it like, yep.
And so is what you're telling me that if CalFresh, I'm sorry, if the Second Harvest Food Bank gets people to fill out the application and then they get it to us and the application is complete when it comes to us, and I know that's not always true. I know our folks are experts at that, but the application is deemed complete and then we hit send.
We actually are the agency responsible for processing and determining eligibility. So what Second Harvest is doing is they're helping the client to complete the application. So Second Harvest is, very well versed. They answer questions for the client. They're sort of, think of it like a QA or expediting. They're helping the client through the process. The client submits the application to us. We have to actually determine eligibility, review the case, make sure that all the verifications, documents, we proceed with actually approving the eligibility for the application, just like any other application normally.
So Angela, what I'm interested in understanding is whether or not that our partnership with those agencies that are trusted partners, how much oversight and how much time are we taking with those applications that are for lack of a better word, sort of pre-packaged for us versus people who are coming to us directly?
Yeah.
And whether or not there's a mechanism for moving those faster.
Okay, and I think what you're asking, we can find that out, is what's the approval rate for this subgroup that comes from CBOs versus an approval rate for subset that is not from the CBO. I think that's what you're looking for. We can find that out. I can pull that data for you.
Well, and the other, Angela, the other issue is going to be the ones that are really skilled at it. I recognize that, you know, the staff is receiving lots of applications, but I am interested in understanding if there's a way to fast track those that have been pre-developed for us, for lack of a better word. And then I'm presuming that anybody can use calfresh.org to fill out their own application and send it in.
Yeah.
And same with my benefits, calwin.org.
Yep, exactly.
Okay, great. Thank you for that.
Sure, of course.
The other thing I would just add to is Kaiser is also going to be undertaking an effort beginning on Friday to do the same types of efforts with CalFresh. So initially, they're going to start with the SSI population and then just broaden it to their population at large. And they're going to be working with in all of the counties that they do business in. So we're working closely with all of the partners to see who's doing what, where there's overlap, and where there may be gaps that we can help fill in.
That's really great. And then I only had one other issue on this item, and then I just want to talk about general assistance benefits. One is that we received I received a recommended funding plan for Hunger at Home. And what I wanted to ask, I believe the application or their request for resources went through our EOC. And Dr. Smith, I didn't know who to follow up with this on, but I wanted to better understand whether or not we were investing in Hunger at Home, how much, and then what their bandwidth of service is. I think between Hunger at Home, the food bank, and I know we have other partners, but those two in particular, I have a high level of interest in us strengthening their infrastructure and their ability to support us, because I like others think this is, even if people start to get back to work, I think food scarcity is going to be an issue. And to the point that Dave raised early on, we want to make sure those pipelines for food are really open. And so if we could just get even the board just an off agenda that says, here's where the Hunger at Home application is, or if it was received, would be helpful for me to understand. And then I want to just reinforce the request for the whole food system being on a dashboard, so we understand how many people are using it, and if there are wait lines in any of our categories relative to food would be important to understand. Here's my last question. Since GA, Bob, has been at $350 a month forever, which is really challenging for people to use that to do much, and especially living here. Mike, and this is I think you shared with me that this is a federal, it's a federal standard in terms of the amount of money available through GA.
No, it's state and local standards.
So if we wanted to change the amount, we could do that? Or we would need to do that in partnership with the state?
We have ability to do that. And I think what we talked about is just, we just have to be mindful of what in California, what the welfare and institution codes require and what we'd be tied to sort of in perpetuity if we make the changes.
Got it. Could you do an off agenda on what you recommend in that area, and also whether or not this is an opportunity to get the state to change their contributions to that?
Sure, we can do that.
Thank you. All right. Thank you very much. That was helpful. Are there any other comments or questions on this section?
Supervisor Chavez. Yeah, I just wanted, I'm not sure the last line of inquiry that you just made, if it's the same as I'm going to raise, but I'd like to get an off agenda understanding of what it would take given the emergency, on an emergency basis to dramatically increase either the Meals on Wheels program or the congregate program coming out of local kitchens. We're getting a lot of offers, I know, through my office, and we've heard most of them to logistics, EOC, et cetera, of buildings that are now vacant that have full kitchens in them. For example, the Italian American Heritage Foundation building next to the Salvation Army on 4th Street has been sitting there, and they've had it, offered it to us 2 or 3 weeks ago. I understand we can't congregate people inside of them, but to be able to take advantage of the opportunity for to use those as food distribution centers, whether it's prepared food or sort of food bank type food. I think it's going to be necessary. I don't want to be a doom and gloom person here, but somebody told me that the actual unemployment during the Great Depression was 27%. I think we're approaching that right now. So again, I just want to add that to the mix in terms of what I'd like to hear back on in terms of an off-agenda report. What would it require? Another emergency executive order by the governor, or what, to suspend some of the rules, including the RFP rules, to get in the event that we need to just double down or quadruple the number of food distribution points that we have, under what we now call our nutrition program. So that's a formal request. Thank you.
Thank you. So we've reviewed.
If I may.
Sure,
Thank
Joe.
you. You asked if any further questions. I had one whenever that's appropriate.
Now is appropriate.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to let you know, we just reached out to Insurance Commissioner Lara's office. He responded saying we are addressing this with guidance to the insurers. He will email us back with further information on this and a few other things with what's going on in the next couple of hours. So when our office gets that, we will forward it on to each of the other offices.
Thank you. So with that, on item 6, we had a number of recommendations or requests for further reports, either to go through committee to be, off agenda reports, and irrespective of where they end up going, I would just recommend that they go to the full board. And what we have is if I could get a motion to accept receiving these reports along with the information requests, then I would appreciate that. And if I could ask for a roll call.
Madam President, you do have some individuals who are interested in speaking. Would you like to listen to their public comment now?
I am sorry, I thought I took public comment on this item already.
Okay.
I'm not sure if I thought we did already. Am I incorrect? If someone could help me with that. I think we had Scott Largent on this item.
We had 2 people who have requested to speak since then.
Oh yes, I'm sorry, I closed the public comment period because I wanted to hear from them first before we hear.
Okay. My apologies.
No problem. Thank you. With that, I'd like a roll call vote on the item.
Supervisor Chavez, this is Supervisors Committee, and did someone make a formal motion to accept the report?
That's
Then
what
I'd be happy to do so.
Thank you, Supervisor Submitting. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Happy to second it.
We have a second from Ms. Ellenberg, and we'll do a roll call vote. And the vote is on receiving all of the reports along with the off-agenda requests for information and requests for review of these items as appropriate to Supervisors Submitting's Committee. So we have a motion. We have a second. May I have a roll call vote?
Supervisor Ellenberg?
Yes.
Supervisor Simidian?
Simidian, aye.
Supervisor Cortese?
Aye.
Vice President Wasserman?
Aye.
President Chavez?
Yes, thank you. So that passes unanimously. We're going to go to our last report, and this is to receive a report relating to childcare access for county essential workers and potential expansion of childcare to other groups. And I'm going to turn to Supervisor Ellenberg, who's been playing a leadership role in these efforts, and then Leslie Crowell will present on this item.
Thank you, President. Thanks, President Chavez. Actually, today, Deputy County Executive Leslie Crowell is going to make the report. I just want to take the opportunity once again to thank her and to thank her team. They have been working really creatively and aggressively to make sure that we can offer childcare to as many employee groups as we can. We started, as you all may remember, with a very narrow subset here and have had the opportunity to expand that a little bit more each week. So with that, I will turn this over to Leslie, and thanks so much.
Leslie, would you like, you're on mute still. There you go.
I didn't know I could unmute myself. I was waiting for Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
So through the president, I have a presentation here. We were in the middle of our third week of providing childcare, emergency childcare to essential employees for the county. And we've become essentially more refined in our approach to this, as when we started, we contracted with 4 providers for 400 plus slots. What we're doing, that only went through the first order and then a slight extension till last Friday, April 10th. But as the different orders came out and as the governor issued regulations and so forth, we now have solid childcare offerings through June 5th at 3 providers at a lower commitment level of 104 slots. We're currently using 70 of those today, and hopefully we'll use, up to the 104 if need be. If a county employee needs care and the slots have all been utilized, then what they'll do is the Healthier Kids Foundation will call the provider and say, do you have an available slot? And that provider will advise Healthier Kids what the parents' options are, and we'll see if we can get them placed at what's essentially an auxiliary slot that the county will continue to pay for. So out of over 16,000 employees, almost 17,000 now, that have received notice, 167 had already said they directly desired to get childcare. So I think we're serving the population that's most interested in childcare. When the governor issued the order on April 4th, Saturday, we thought that it would provide a lot more flexibility than it turns out. And the main reason is that the requirement is that if you're in a 2-parent family, both parents need to be essential workers. And so that could be a stumbling block for other employers to offer this to their employees, a grocery store, a trucking firm, et cetera, that kind of thing. Or in our case, Valley Transportation Authority or the Community Health Partnership. So they're sort of mulling this over and trying to decide the approach they want to take. And I will say one more thing, and that is that the daycare slots in South County, we don't have any providers there, and yet we had people who expressed an interest. So we're going to see what the demand ends up being, and we may work something out with the Morgan Hill YMCA. That's pending, potentially, depending on demand. We have a website that we've been cooperating with the Santa Clara County Office of Education. And Rhonda, I don't know if you can show that as the 5th slide there. And it shows the resources that are available that anybody can look up in that link there. And then I have a picture of it on the 5th page there. And so that's just a snapshot, so you could see a tease of it, but it has information for county employees as well as non-county employees. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. And I'll start with Supervisor Cortese.
Yeah, it's just a very simple question. Who exactly is eligible under these numbers? The 167 who have responded, is that just across the board county employees?
The people we've reached out to are defined by the departments or labor relations through departmental input as county essential workers. So all the employees in the Valley Medical Center, Health and Hospital, and clinics and community health services meet that definition, as well as the majority of the law enforcement departments. Then the others, it's up to the department to give us a list of the job codes or the individual employees that they deem essential. And so we're up to 16,670 of those employees have received this availability notice.
So the vast majority, in other words, are eligible when it comes right down to it.
Yeah, as long as you're essential. If we were to add, we could probably add more people if indeed we had a major outreach for disaster service workers, because then other employees would fall into the essential category as well, but we haven't yet had a major call for general disaster service workers.
Okay, that's enough for now. I have a couple more questions, but I'll ask them offline and just ask that the answers be shared with all of us. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for the report. Excellent report.
Yeah, and before I go on, I apologize. I should have gone to the public, so let me do that. Thank you, Dave, and Susan, I apologize for that to you. So if we have any public speakers on this item, this would be the time for them to speak.
The next speaker is Patricia Moran. I'm unmuting you. Please accept the unmute and you will have 1 minute to speak once the timer begins. There appears to be a technical issue with Patricia Moran's version of Zoom. I'm unable to unmute her microphone.
Oh. All right. Is there anybody else? Seeing no others, we'll go back to the board. Susan? Sorry about that, Patricia. Go ahead, Susan.
Thank you. Thank you, Leslie, for the report. I want to just emphasize and highlight the discrepancy that we are still finding here. As of last Friday, the survey found that 167 of 16,000 employees desired emergency childcare, but only 1,200 people responded to the survey. So we've got a big gap between the number of employees who are eligible and the number who responded. We talked a little bit last week about why the enrollment is lower than anticipated, whether it's location, fear of infection, desire to not disrupt kids any further, or the hours. So I am strongly in favor of opening this up as broadly as we can, so that we have we've got the spaces available. A number of organizations really stepped up quickly to provide this. So if we are in a position now to be offering spaces to all emergency and temporary workers, the category that Leslie just mentioned, I think we should be doing that. Additionally, I have a question for Leslie, something that I didn't see in the report. We had some initial conversations about the Carina child provider referral service that SEIU brought to us, that potentially is positioned to meet the needs of employees who do need childcare, but need it during different hours. Have we been able to incorporate that as a referral, or are we looking into that, or have we made any determinations already? Questions for Leslie.
Yes, through the chair. We haven't done that yet. We were waiting to see if this demand indeed picked up. We also found out on Friday that the governor's order helps these small daycare providers get some assistance through offsetting costs for supplies such as wipes, disinfecting, those kind of things. So what I think we're going to do is look at this and see what happens with the additional 675 people that were notified yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
And then if we hear a lot more from people, we haven't had a large outcry, if you will, or inquiry about the different hours, but we can certainly keep a bead on that and monitor accordingly.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Susan, thanks for all your work on this. Supervisor Simidian, did you have any comments or questions on this item?
Not at this time, except to say thanks to all parties involved.
Thank you. Supervisor Wasserman?
Thanks as well. No questions.
Thank you. I just had a few, and my basic questions are around how we broaden this up to essential workers. And one of my concerns is that, and I'll just use VTA as an example, that we're getting a lot of people who we want to make sure are maintaining these kind of core functions. And I'm concerned about whether or not there's an opportunity for us to partner with primary agencies to share costs that could be recovered through FEMA, so that we're not charging folks to have their kids in childcare. And here's what my thinking is on that. As more and more people start to go back to work, and we want essential workers to stay working. So people who are doing grocery work or trucking or any of those industries, that the copay is a disincentive and may incentivize people who are going back to work to place children with older parents. And I think irrespective of how we open up the economy, we're going to be doing it in layers and slowly, and we're still going to want to have a need to protect the more vulnerable parts of our population. So I'm wondering, have we talked about mechanisms for employer contributions or drawing more money down from FEMA to make it possible for the VTA driver down, over to the clerk, over to people who are doing janitorial work?
We haven't yet done that. I would defer to the county executive to comment possibly on opening that up beyond county employees.
Dr. Smith?
At this point, I think our capacity is limited enough that I don't know that we have the ability to open it up widely, but certainly it's on the list of things to do. And, once we get a capacity commitment from providers that we can actually do, then we have to figure out a way to do it. Yes.
So what I would like to request is that conversation take place sometime this week. And I'm particularly interested in our partners at the YMCA and through the Healthier Kids Foundation, other providers. And the reason I'm asking the question is I do think that as we are thinking about and planning for people going back to work, one of the challenges that we're going to have is that if schools stay closed for the year, which it looks like they are, then we are going to have a lot of people who don't have access to childcare, and we have some, and period. And we're going to be wanting more people to potentially be going back to work, period. And they are going to be considered essential workers. I was looking at I think it's the cybersecurity list of essential workers, and it's actually relatively broad. I don't think we need to be responsible for everybody. I do think that employees who make a lower amount of money should have access to free childcare, particularly if we're wanting them to be at work. And I'm just interested in us taking a look at how we can do this. I think it fits into a longer term vision that we've shared countywide about, access to early learning and childcare. And that's part of the reason I was glad that Susan raised the Karina group, because I think that fits nicely into work we're already going to be trying to do. And so as much as we can use the emergency to lay the groundwork, I think would be really important. So I am really interested in those discussions. I'm interested in what we think the FEMA reimbursement is. I'm also interested to see if employers are interested in helping to offset getting their employees back to work. That might be a way for us to look at long-term funding. Thoughts or concerns about that from Leslie or Jeff?
No, well, go ahead, Jeff.
No, I hear you, and we'll try to come up with a plan.
Thank you. Susan, did you have
I don't think we're in danger of hitting capacity yet. In fact, we've reduced the number of seats that we had contracted for initially because we didn't have quite the size surge that we had anticipated. So I'm not concerned right now about hitting capacity. I think we've got a lot more, a lot more ability to grow the system as it stands right now. So I just want to put that piece out there.
Thank you. And Leslie, thank you, and Susan for this. This is really, really important work and ground laying for us. I'm going to go back to public speakers because I was a little confusing about going back and forth. My colleagues don't have any other comments. If any of you have comments after we hear from the public speakers, I'll come back to you. If not, we'll wrap up this section. We have 3 public speakers, and each of them have a minute to weigh in, and we'll only take the 3 that are on the board. Thank you.
The next speaker is Melissa Willett. I'm unmuting you. Please accept the unmute and you will have 1 minute to speak once the timer begins.
Hi, thank you. Melissa Willett, County of Santa Clara essential worker, SEIU 521 vice president. I'm a mother of a child, single parent, and I just wanted to say a couple of quick things. First, the childcare offered by the county is great. It's a really good first step. Baby step, because it has a lot of holes in the coverage. We need coverage childcare for kids with adaptive needs. We need coverage for the hospital workers who are working maybe 12-hour shifts or who work 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. We need earlier and later pickup and drop off. And there's also location issues. For locations specifically throughout the whole county is just not enough. Please expand childcare coverage to include reimbursements for childcare to ensure that's accessible for all county essential workers. And in-home daycare providers are also a very important part of our communities and are going to be devastated by the economic crisis. And using Karina to get daycare provider, in-home daycare provider reimbursements critical for essential workers.
The next speaker is number 295. I'm unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You will have 1 minute to speak once the timer begins. Caller number 295, are you there? Moving on, our next speaker is number 011. I'm unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You will have 1 minute to speak once the timer begins.
Yes, good morning. My name is Nancy Harvey, and I'm a licensed child care provider. And just wanted to say, first of all, thank you for allowing me to have an opportunity to speak to you. Karina is an amazing system because it allows providers that are licensed and bonded to offer a variety of services to essential workers. Many of our providers have extended non-traditional working hours, early morning. They open up early morning. They close later in the evening. Many offer pickup and drop-off services and even weekend hours. And many can accommodate school-age children. Some of them even help the children with after-school homework. So this is an amazing system that it would be a win-win for everyone who is able to utilize the system. And again, we are asking the county to assist with financing this project. So thank you so much.
So we have no other hands on this item? Okay. So with that, are there any other questions or comments from my colleagues? I would like to get a motion to receive the report.
Motion made, and this is Mike. I've got a question when you have a chance, Madam President.
Is it on this topic?
No, it's just when we're all done.
Okay.
Second the motion.
We have a motion and a second. And with that motion, I'm going to ask the maker and the seconder to include the requests for information and strategies that have been included as part of the discussion in their motion. Is that comfortable for the maker of the motion?
Yes.
And the seconder?
Fine.
Any other comments on the motion? Seeing none, what I'm going to do is ask for a roll call vote.
Supervisor Ellenberg?
Yes.
Supervisor Simidian?
Simidian, aye.
Supervisor Cortese?
Aye.
Vice President Wasserman?
Aye.
And President Chavez?
Yes, thank you. That passes unanimously. Mike, was your question on item 7 or prior to adjournment?
Prior to adjournment.
Okay. What I'll do is I'll take Supervisor Wasserman's comments, and then I just wanted to make some comments about next steps based on today's meeting and other requests that we've had for information. Supervisor Wasserman?
Thank you. And my comments may tie into your comments. I appreciate staff volunteering to do so much off agenda as far as that goes. The special meetings for me, I think are appropriate when there's a time sensitive, urgent type thing to go on. I appreciate the recommendations from my fellow board members saying today about bringing things to committee. And I just wanted to share those thoughts, and hopefully we can proceed that way. I appreciate the fact we held the meeting today. We got it done in a couple of hours, but I also know how much is involved in getting this kind of meeting done as compared to off agenda and and committee meetings. So I just wanted to toss that out. Thank you.
Thank you. So a couple things, any other comments from my colleagues about today or future? So a couple things I just wanted to lift up for my colleagues. And first of all, just to thank the staff for the quick work and the reports that we got and the information we got. It was very, very helpful. Second is that we have a regular board meeting next week. We'll have a COVID-19 item on the agenda as we have had in the past. What I had sent out to my colleagues was a list of issues that had been raised with me that they wanted to make sure were covered. I'm going to resend that same email with some additions based on feedback I've gotten from some of you. And then I will be forwarding that to Dr. Smith to structure the discussion for COVID-19. There are two distinct parts that we wanted to lift up, or I wanted to divide the meeting into. Part A is what's happening on the ground now and getting an update from our medical professionals about the direction we're going in. Part B is some of the issues that have been raised about what are the next steps, how are we moving out of COVID-19, the emergency to COVID-19, I want to be careful about how I say this, but how and what we're learning at a state and national level about recommendations about how we move out of this time period. When I send you, my colleagues, the request for what you'd most like to discuss, if you could think about those two buckets, one, which is what's happening today in terms of emergency, and two, what are we laying groundwork for that we need to think about as we move out of this this situation. I think the issue, a good example of this was what Supervisor Simitian raised about how are we preparing for people who will not have insurance. That to me is a second bucket question. So I'll refine that in the email that I send you. I'm going to ask that I get feedback from you before noon tomorrow so that we give staff a chance to think about what they'd like to present and how they would like to present it. Okay with everyone?
A point of clarification. You're talking about for the next regular board meeting?
I am.
Okay, great. I appreciate that. And I just want to echo Supervisor Wasserman's comments about trying to the extent that we can to keep additional issues and reports that we want, information that we want, either within the regular board meeting structure or within the committee's structure so that we are really minimizing the number of additional or special meetings that we need to have. Again, just thinking about everybody's schedules and how busy they are, whatever we can get through existing structures and in off agenda reports, I would appreciate. And
great. So what I would say is that part of how we ended up with this special meeting was in part based on the feedback that we got from all of you previously in terms of what does or doesn't fit in committee. I will also say that Supervisors Cortese and I have canceled our committee meetings in order to give staff more time on some issues. So some we are bringing directly to the board. All that being said, if you respond to my email, then I'll be happy to dice that up and send something back to all of you and to staff. So I'll send it again to the 5 of you, and then I'll forward it to staff with your comments. All right. Thank you, everybody. And I want to thank again staff, and we are adjourned. Have a good day.